an overlay of data.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome. Is it a Happy New Year?
It is.
Are we still saying that? Do people still say that in the real world?
I'm going to say it as part of the media insincerity that people put on when they do shows and say, good morning, AA, good morning, chat, Happy New Year, everybody. It seems like only 5 minutes ago it was all everybody getting on and peace and love to all men, and now that's gone.
My phone has given up the ghost. I've had the same phone for like 5 years. And you know that built-in obsolescence thing people talk about? If you've got an Apple iPhone, after about 5 years, it really starts to be like, yeah, I don't want to work anymore. You have to buy a new phone now. It's kicked in, right? And it's doing this thing where it's just restarting every 3 minutes. And I've looked it up, and it's like, right, I need to update the iOS, but I cannot get the iOS to update within that 3 minute time slot.
Yeah.
And the one time I've got it to do it, the update failed. So I'm considering, Simon, and I talked to the missus about it, I said I'm considering not replacing it, letting it like just going phone free. What do you think about that?
The Blair arc completes.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about it that way. Be like my hero. Yeah. Welcome, by the way, audience, to the internet's favorite sensible centre-left podcast, with my sensible centre-left friend Simon and our token right winger Horace. How you doing?
I'm like the Combs of Hannity and Combs, aren't I?
You're like I don't know, Michael Portillo sitting next to Alan Johnson. Is that fair?
Do you want me to get? Are you telling me to clear off or what? Like,
no.
Horrible stuff.
I was trying to think of a left and right, or Alan Johnson. I mean, at least I didn't make Simon Diane Abbott.
That would have. But Michael Portillo is a pathetic right wing. I mean, he's so weak. It's ridiculous.
You see, I did notice on the comments for the last show that Team Horus is slowly building underneath. You know, my heartless Horus thing didn't stick at all. They want
because
ruthless
I wore it, because
Horus.
You hit me with that, and I got up smiling. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
there is a thing that happens in wrestling where if there's a heel for quite a long time, the fans start to like that heel, and it actually becomes like either they get turned. So a famous case was in Chicago, Dick the Bruiser and his mate the Crusher, right? The Crusher and Dick the Bruiser. They were badass heels, right? And after a while, the crowd just loved them. Same thing happened with Legion of Doom. Do you remember them? The Road Warriors? Badass, kick-ass. Crowd started loving them. Same thing happened with Brock Lesnar more recently.
and The Rock.
And Stone Cold was meant to be a heel. Let's not forget.
Yeah. And The Rock as well.
And The Rock, yeah. So it happens that if and actually people don't talk about this as much, but the same thing happened with Ric Flair, because he'd been around in the Carolinas for so long that after 10 years or something, the fans just loved him. Like in the certain areas, they couldn't book him as a heel because the fans just absolutely loved the guy. So yeah, I mean, Horace may have been on the show long enough, Simon, that he's getting babyface heat rather than heel heat.
For when when the kayfabe is resisted by the crowd, when the crowd say no, Like,
Yeah.
is there a word for that?
I don't know, and I don't actually know if there's a name for that. It does happen though. It famously happened because the other thing happens, right? If there's a baby face being on top for too long, the crowd gets fed up of them as the baby face. And when Hulk Hogan came back in 1992, you know, after a decade of Hogan, they'd kind of seen it all, so they were a bit bored of him. And so in the 1992 Royal Rumble, which Ric Flair won, by the way, he was eliminated by Sid Justice. Do you remember him? Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, the big guy. And the crowd booed Hogan and cheered Sid Justice, which should have been a sign, right, for Vince and for Hogan. Heel turn Hogan now. The crowd have had enough of Hogan, but they didn't. They were like, no, the formula works. So against the fans' wishes, they continued to book Sid as the heel, Hogan as the babyface, even though he'd gone stale. So yeah, it does happen in the other way. I don't know what the name for it is though. Just like the crowd reject the booking, basically. So.
Yeah, like all the time that I was watching, I had about a 2-year period of watching WWF like intensively, 98 to 2000 roughly, and like I was always annoyed by. You could feel like Vince McMahon's hand all over it, saying this guy's going to be a baddie now. This guy's going to be a heel now. This guy's going to be, but like it was the period when he made Triple H the central character. Yeah, and it was just imposed. It was like nobody wants this guy. He's so boring.
I mean, well,
and
I mean, one of the reasons I'm still fascinated with it is because it is a kind of like elite theory thing as well, where it's like the crowd want to book the show bottom up, but Vince is always imposing his will against. Like, I mean, probably the banner case was. Do you remember John Cena? I mean, I know he's recently retired, but when Cena became the champ, the crowd fucking hated him. And Vince was like, no, he's going to be the champion. He's going to be the champion for 6 years. And he shoved it down the throat. And now fans think of John Cena as a legend, right? But it literally took years of Vince shoving this guy. He did the same thing with Ultimate Warrior, kind of forced Ultimate Warrior and now people remember him fondly. But
is John Cena the guy who was in Blade Runner 2049 briefly? No, there is one. Oh no, sorry, no, I mean Dave Bautista.
Bautista.
Yeah.
Sorry, he's in movies, right? So yeah, he
became a movie star. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, where were we? I've got tragic news on the hot bin front. It was frozen shut the other day. I couldn't open it, which represents the nadir of my composting career. On a more positive note, I opened it earlier on, and do you remember I said there'd been an infestation of those snow lice or whatever they're called?
Yeah.
Well, they're all gone. I think the the cold snap has killed them all.
Wow.
So, and the temperature is still at 15, even though it's freezing outside. So there we are.
Gosh. That didn't sound like a total failure. I had a question for you guys that sort of links into the program. Have you seen the Oliver Stone film Nixon?
Yes, I saw it a while back. Yeah.
It's about 3 hours. It's a proper. I think the director's cut's even longer. It's like 3.5 or something.
Is it Anthony Hopkins?
Yeah, Tony Hopkins.
Yeah.
I was just wondering. Okay, I was just wondering if you guys liked it or not.
Not as much as JFK, but I have to revisit the film. I have to go and look at it again.
I have fonder memories of Frost Nixon, to be honest.
Yeah, Frost Nixon's. I don't think that's a great Nixon though. That is it Anthony Langella?
Frank Langella. Yeah,
Frank Langella. I don't think he's that great an actor. I don't know how he gets these big roles.
I think that Tony Hopkins Nixon was interesting because of the dynamic at the end, where he's completely paranoid, neurotic throughout the film. Why do they hate me so much? And then he gives the farewell speech at the end, and it's brilliant.
Yeah, right.
And you really like him, the way he's played.
It's like really dignified.
Yeah.
I think that is a good film, but Anthony Hopkins is superb in that. I think it's a really brilliant performance.
Yeah.
And I've never even particularly noticed. I mean, I've watched Silence of the Lambs. He's very good in that, but I haven't watched a lot of Hopkins films. But he's very, very good as Nixon.
People saying JFK is Oliver Stone slop. I reject.
It's
I
not
reject
historical.
No.
JFK, I think, is superb.
Superb filmmaking.
You have to take it as like fictional. Yeah, it's excellent filmmaking. Yeah, really.
I bet Oliver Stone's not happy about Maduro.
No, he loves it.
I'd imagine that he'd be all over that.
Because he did Doko and Chavez, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, he was mates with all those guys, wasn't
he? Yeah.
Given that it's such a huge story, I can't not ask you two about it. So, where do you guys roughly? I would say it's been a divisive issue, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Many people have disappointed me. I stand on the. I always stand on the same side as like Jeremy Corbyn and people like this, as a true anti-war, like you know, I'm not even a veteran because I support the Iraq War, but I'm not going to do it next time. You know what I mean? It's like every single person who supported the Iraq War, apart from Tony Blair and possibly George Bush and core neocons, now have turned on that position, like Tucker Carlson, somebody like that. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do it again. You know, already been down that road. I'm going to do it again. But yeah, where are you on it, Simon?
Gosh, I don't know if I want to get totally entangled in it, but I think I did a tweet just before we came on about, I did a little clip from Time Trumpet, the old sequence where Tesco invades Denmark, because I just thought it's the sort of keynote of neoliberal expansionism. It's kind of producing just the right, perfectly calibrated emotional affect in people who are sort of culturally demoralized. And it's just at the moment they're attempting to remoralize, you know, by trying to sort of consume and replicate the same attention economy that is already monopolized by a bigger framing. Because I mean, we spent half of last year looking at Curtis, talking about it's a feedback system now. It plays you back to you. Yeah. And it's the idea of the fake reality can seem very glib, I guess, to these guys. They think it's a kind of witchcraft, it's gin brained and all this kind of stuff. But the algo plays you back to you. And we have a static culture that's constantly being remixed in this sort of unending form of pacification. And I'm not trying to be a doomer, but the idea you referred to in the video with, I can't remember the chap's name, but you were bringing up the thing about you can just do things meme, There's this kind of agentic exuberance that people have got at the minute. And it's almost seemingly unaware that the system that we're in, it still has a kind of Newtonian response, cause and effect. It reacts against things or it incorporates them. It forms these sorts of antibodies to narrative. And if it hasn't already presented you with the message of you can already do things or seeded it in some way, it's certainly happy with this kind of... what we're seeing, I think of it as a sort of caffeine ethnocentrism. It's kind of a sort of cheap hit of the kind of forms that you want, the ideas that you want, and it's presented as a kind of, it's almost like the framing of a value set kind of argument. Everything's about referring it back to the value. I mean, friend enemy has become a prepackaged value set. Well, it's these enemies you want to be looking at. It's boil in the bag consumerism. And I mean, it was like last week I talked about a little clip of Slavoj Zizek. He was talking about Coca-Cola as the perfect product, that it promotes the desire for desire itself. That's to say, it gathers around it its own sense of huge expectation, anticipation, fulfillment. Coke is it, man, but it also contains the inhibitor for itself, because when you drink it, it turns to shit very quickly, and you have to have another one and another one. So it's if products contrive to sort of enforce this kind of hamster wheel consumption, what do news and politics do? It's like there's some paper victories that have given us a sort of Coca-Cola hit, and people have resolutely convinced themselves that the system produces no antibodies when they try to do this sort of culture hacking. And the rush is so strong, they just don't foresee that they're going to need the systems to supply more stimulus to give them meaning in what they're already doing, and they'll keep attending to the sort of minutiae of the news cycle and battling about granularities and less on the container in which the news is presented, if you know what I mean.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's where the focus is at. It's not actually on the framing.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder if this one is of a slightly different flavor from the general neocon stuff that has gone on in the past, because this one does seem to be much more like America plus Israel in brackets going it alone. Clearly, like the British establishment was caught on the hop. It seems like more genuinely rogue in a way. I don't know. What do you think, Horus?
I am dead against it. I noticed all the worst people are in favour of it. That I was talking to Bo, History Bro, from the Lotus Eaters about it on the day, and we disagreed on this. He said, just like Elliot Abrams or Victoria Nuland being in favour of, I don't know if Nuland was in favour, but she probably was. But all the neocons and just pro-war people like Tom Cotton and stuff, and Trump himself and John Bolton, all the worst
Lindsey
people.
Graham.
Lindsey Graham. Fucking hell. And Bo said to me, just Victoria Nuland being against something doesn't make it bad. And I said, normally I'd agree. Normally that is logical. But in their case, they are so rotten and foul and so contrary to everything that's good and just in the interest of normal people, that I do think it is a strong enough indicator. If they're all in favour of something, you can take it as read that it's bad. I don't feel fully informed on it, but I am pretty strongly convinced it was bad. And I thought the takes on Twitter, you were right to say, is one of the worst days I've ever seen on Twitter. Awful, absolutely awful, shameful, embarrassing. And yeah, I'm just, I mean, anything involving Narco Rubio as well is just automatically bad. He's a demon. He always has been. There's nothing good about him. Irredeemable. He's at the heart of all this.
I mean, that show I did with David Clues, I think David voiced what a lot of people were probably privately feeling or, witnessing on their timeline. Because, I mean, certainly, I think a lot of people had your reaction, Horus, or his reaction, or my own reaction. Yeah, it is a little bit dispiriting. But the reason I mentioned the difference from previous ones is because I think that the MAGA / America First, the American nationalist crowd are trying to convince themselves that this is something new, that it's not it's not just neocon redux. It's like some evolution of the Monroe Doctrine or Western Hemisphere, or there's all sorts of justifications for it to present it as not neocon. Whereas you, Horus,
I can't believe it's not neocon.
I can't believe it's not neocon. Like you, Horus, I just look at there's a particular network on Twitter, right, where how there are different levels of there's a particular set of really rancid Zionists, right, who I forget their names now, but you know them when you see them. Right, like Ari something. What's his name? That one, like Dr. Klein. Like there's I don't know. There's a particular set of them, and when they're on board with something, it's bad. And
I mean, the people in
they
mainstream
were
media,
full 100% on it. Yeah.
Sorry, the people in the legacy media as well. Because I watch all these shows like Kim Iverson and the Jew Dissidents, those American sort of news commentary shows. They're all leftists. They're all but they give me some, quick glimpse, without having to watch rolling news. A glimpse of what's going on in the American legacy media. And yeah, it's like Tom Cotton. All I've ever heard of him is him supporting wars. That's what he exists for. And he was just straight on it. Just loves it. Marco Rubio himself. What has he ever done other than just advocate for wars and intervention in other countries? He exists for. And he's the hardest possible advocate for it, even harder than Trump himself. And it's probably related to Cuba. They're probably going to go. I mean, you can't tell yet, but they're probably trying something with Cuba as well. Marco Rubio seems to be indicating that, and it's notable. A lot of people mentioned this, that the people personally visiting, like the actual bodyguard SS sort of thing of Maduro, who is a piece of shit. Like, let it be said, his bodyguard are all Cubans apparently, and like there's even suggestions. The Duran, believe it or not, they were suggesting that Maduro was kind of a Cuban agent. Started working for Cuba. I was quite surprised to hear that. I thought the Duran would be like pro Maduro because they're just being sort of not aligned, But yeah, like so maybe it's going for Cuba in a couple of weeks.
Is Horus going a bit crackly for you, Simon?
A little bit roboty, yeah.
Yeah, just a tiny bit. Yeah, I mean, of course, my number one concern with all these things, what's it going to do to the price of my cigars? I'm smoking a Ramon alone there, especially selected right now. Is that going to be put out even because they've gone up a lot in the past couple of years? I hope America aren't going to wreck my Cuban cigars. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I watched the Lotus Eaters, and I have to say, Harry Robinson just went for it. I don't know if you've watched that section.
Not seeing
it's called, MAGA goes full neocon or something like that. And Harry went for it. And interestingly, Carl was on the segment. Okay. And I mean, Carl was, how can I put it? He came out with a comment that interests me because it's relevant to what we talk about on these Adam Curtis reviews almost every single week. He said, don't you think that all of these old regimes like Venezuela and Iran, the Mullah regime, don't they seem antiquated? They seem like they belong to last century. What are the mullahs even doing here? Capitalism won. That's what Carl said. And Harry fired back straight away and he said, isn't that just the end of history? Right? Isn't that just Fukuyama?
Yeah.
But I kind of know what Carl means as well. It does seem a bit old-fashioned.
Yeah.
Cold War coded and so on for these, old-fashioned dictatorship. Like Assad, it was like a holdover, right? And and now Maduro. Even the figure of Maduro always to me felt like a holdover of Chavez. I mean, Chavez was the original. Maduro is. Whenever I've looked at Maduro, I always just think, well, you're not Chavez. Or like when Cuba after Castro died.
Yeah.
And then it was his brother for a bit, and now it's some other dude, right? Or is this still his brother?
Yeah. In a way, you can see it, can't you? Because, I mean, there is this, although on the one hand, as you said, the left are kind of owning a lot of things at the moment, there is still the awareness on the left of the failure of the left, you know what I mean, in the last 30, 40 years. And so these places are just, in a sense, staggering along, the remnants of ideology. Everybody has an image of Cuba with all the old cars and so on, and all these other countries that are just sort of tumbling along on the fumes of an idea that they kind of still are in denial about, that it hasn't worked.
So, I mean, I don't know, though, because what does that mean? Does that mean just like America just slowly bombs everywhere into having a Walmart, or a McDonald's in every corner,
and we all become the last men?
Oh, it's depressing.
We're there, aren't we?
It's depressing, but at the same time, it's obvious that something's not worked with those regimes too.
Yes. Well, have you ever been to Caracas?
I mean, I wonder. How can I put this? Like, if you ask leftists about these sorts of things, though, they'll always just immediately point to, look, you can't make any conclusions about Venezuela or about Iran or about any other country because they're massively coerced by sanctions, by US. Like, the America just will not allow anything else to work or flourish. It just uses force, coercion, sanctions, and bully beef tactics to keep everything else down. So it's like, well, you can't say, well, okay, socialism works or doesn't work or whatever. It's literally just America doesn't allow anything else.
Might is right.
Something like this. I mean, see, the thing is this is the other thing. People say, oh well, capitalism won. Then those same people will complain that their own countries are socialist. You know, this was the same, like Carl was saying the other day, Keir Starmer's turn next because he's a socialist dictator. Or in America, they could say, well, the Democrats, they've increased the welfare state, or the welfare spending's too high or whatever. So it's like there's a Schrodinger's capitalism too. This is what always used to bug me about libertarians. So, well, Coca-Cola is it's not real capitalism. It's corporate capitalism.
Corporate, crony company.
But then when they want to compare it to the Soviet Union or something, they'll say, oh well, look, Coca-Cola works. That's capitalism work. You know what I mean? There is this kind of I don't know what to make about the statement capitalism won, but I'm thinking it over.
Well, we've got all the trite baubles of capitalism, yes. But then we've got curries as well, which clearly doesn't work.
So anyway, Horus presumably is rebooting.
Yes.
Yes. Maybe we should get going, but I don't want to start it without Horus here. My cigar's gone out as well.
I've been enjoying, by the way, Marco Pierre White videos since you went on that thing last year.
Isn't he amazing? Isn't he amazing?
Great. He's just wonderful. The way he talks, the slow, wise, sage-like way. I made my Yorkshire puddings at Christmas because I make Yorkshire puddings and beef, Prince of Meats, for Christmas, and he refined my. I'd had this recipe for Yorkshire pudding that weren't quite working last year. I'd got them off a sort of YouTube mum, and it was a kind of sort of old reliable, but it wasn't quite good enough. And then I followed Marco's way. He said, "Don't rush, take your time." And he does all these things, and he's great. He's great talking about just about anything.
I'm not kidding you. I learn something cooking related now, but I learn something from him every time I watch him. Little comment he makes, just little things here and there, like he'll throw it in, like, oh, don't stick a chicken breast on hot sizzling pan. You'll it will sear too quickly. You have to put it on a cold pan and bring the heat up. I'd never been taught that. I'd never heard that anywhere. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's just little things all the time.
Just go away, everybody, and find his video on making a tomato sauce.
I've made that tomato sauce. It's been requested again.
Did you have the conical strainer as well? Amazing.
I've been looking for a conical strainer.
Amazing.
Can't find one.
Attention to detail.
Oh, he's brilliant.
Yeah, I've got to grate those onions in future.
And I've been grating the onions. I grate the onions every time now. I mean, he's changed. He is transformed. He's brought me up a level.
Yeah. I watched that long video he did for BBC Maestro channel on YouTube, the one where he talks about his childhood. And he's such a natural storyteller. He's got such a warm kind of way of drawing you in as he's a young boy in 1978, and his dad sends him off to work in the local hotel. Tells him to put on his Sunday best, and he goes to work in this restaurant. Fantastic.
What I love, Simon, it's a man's world, isn't it? He lives in a man's world.
Yeah.
He's a man's man.
Yeah, but completely relaxed in his strength. Yeah. He doesn't have to be demonstrative. There's no machismo. He's been there. He's done it. He's climbed the mountain several times.
Yeah, and he's not afraid to put his mother over either, which just shows you. Like when I say, like, he's always going back to how his mum used to cook something or whatever. So I don't know. He's a great. I love him. I watch him all. I watched him enough that little AAA. When I cook, she comes along and she goes, "Are you trying to be like Marco Pierre White?"
Excellent.
So it's Horace. Are you back? Are you back, son?
Horace. Yeah, I hope I sound all right now. I'm sorry about that.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, you sound better.
The cook we're talking about, to the person in the chat, is Marco Pierre White. Go and look him up. He's a Michelin-starred chef who, strangely, he was almost like the Marlon Brando of chefing, because Marlon Brando got to a point in his acting career where he felt acting was kind of competitive and ridiculous. And this is why he walked away and he made crappy films and he pigged out and just became really fat. But he had something I admire in Marlon Brando as an actor. He had this fundamental suspicion that it was a ridiculous kind of thing. And he kind of despised the profession. And I kind of like that.
Yeah. And also, Marlon Brando works quite well as an analogy.
Yeah.
Because there was a generation of TV chefs. Just like there was a generation of method actors, you know, Robert De Niro and Jack Nicholson and Al Pacino and so on. And Brando was their hero.
Yeah.
And Marco Pierre White's relationship with Gordon Ramsay and all the other ones, he's kind of like their hero, a generation above them as well. So it's kind of, that works quite well as an analogy.
Yeah. And I mean, he, Gordon Ramsay became far, far richer than Marco Pierre White, but it doesn't, you feel Pierre White's got the integrity.
Yeah. I tell you what, that BBC Maestro series, that every single episode of that, if a new one comes up, because you know what YouTube is like, it just throws, like you watch something, it's like, right, this guy loves, it just throws Marco Pierre White at me now. And I'm like, yeah, I'm here for it. I'm going to watch every Knorr recipe, every BBC Maestro one.
Yeah.
I'm there for it. So yeah,
I've
got my Le Creuset pans now, right?
You got to talk about a grand's worth of Le Creuset there or something.
well,
fantastic.
What happened was that I actually did get it for Christmas after nobody got me anything for my birthday. I finally I think everybody felt bad, so I ended up with this Le Creuset pan, and then I also got some tweed jackets, right? Because my parents wanted to get me a tweed jacket. So we went down to Sarn, there's an out-of-town designer outlet village where I used to work in McDonald's, funny enough, Simon, where you get things, brand stuff at massively reduced prices. And they've got a Le Creuset shop.
Oh, wow.
Right. And there was a massive January sale on. And I was like, well, I mean, okay, jealous. I have to.
Yeah. So
now I've got the little spatulas that he uses as well. And I tell you what, it makes a difference. I made a shepherd's pie, Marco Pierre White style, with the grated onions and the carrots and so on.
Wow. And
if you use those spatulas on a Le Creuset pan on the low heat, the fineness, like there's no, like sometimes you make a pie, it might have like meat lumps or like fineness of the sauce. Yeah, well, it's elevated things to the next level. So.
Oh, brilliant! I mean, you've got to remember the stove is a piano. You've got to
I mean, I haven't quite got to the stage where I can play the piano and all that, but yeah, we sound like two old women here, Simon.
It's brilliant. Yeah, I've turned my volume down to people in the chat, by the way. One last thing that I should make, which is it's on a slightly serious subject. Last year we had a notice of a tweet that went out that announced that our friend Lady of Shalott had passed away, and it turns out that she had not. So we just correct the record on that. I had a message from her over Christmas time. She DM'd me and I sort of freaked out when I saw it was from her account. But it turns out that she had to be in hospital for a very long time after an operation in a coma for 6 months. So I don't think she'll mind announcing that. But just to correct it, yeah, luckily she is still alive. And the announcement that she died was wrong. But she had been out of touch for a very long time. I DM'd her last February and heard from her, and then she went completely silent. And then, it was announced by someone who claimed to know that, she had died, and wrongly, it turns out. So we're very fortunate. That was our Christmas miracle.
Yeah. Now she also DM'd me, and I have to say, Simon, it was like I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you couldn't and it was like 2 a.m. And I was like, am I dream? And my heart, I don't know, like involuntarily, my heart just started beating. I was like, what? But so, yeah, turns out, I mean, it is like something out of plot out of a movie.
Oh, God, yeah.
Telling me about how to learning how to smell flowers again and things like this. But I'm glad, it's kind of, there's a weird thing. It's kind of like good news in a way. In a strange way.
Yeah. But she's recovering. She's been out of it for a long time and she's having to sort of relearn things. So, give her your best wishes, but give her time as well.
She told me that one of the things is my banger's better than Madonna. She was listening to them, trying to remember, because she was really into music and things like that. So anyway, if you're listening, hope you're on the road to recovery still. All right, so shall we make a start then? Let's make a start.
Oil was now rising up to replace coal, and more of it came from the Middle East. In countries like Saudi Arabia, the Western oil companies had created their own managed communities. But these communities were for the managers, who lived a dreamlike existence in the middle of the desert. Their golf courses created by rolling crude oil into the sand, while the workers were controlled by authoritarian governments. They were no threat. And across the world, the oil industry was a scattered, diffused network, where there was never any chance of enough workers coming together to create a critical mass, out of which would come collective action. But at that very moment, something was revealed in another remote part of the world that was going to lead to a realization that fossil fuels could not only change the nature of power, they could also change the whole structure of the planet.
On the top of the world, below the surface of a giant ice cap, a city is buried. Camp Century is buried below the surface of this ice cap. Beneath it, the ice descends for 6,000 feet. In this remote setting, Camp Century is a symbol of man's unceasing struggle to conquer his environment.
Camp Century pretended to be a scientific base. In reality, it was a disguise for Project Iceworm. 600 nuclear missiles were going to be hidden in hundreds of miles of tunnels under the ice, targeted at Russia. But as a part of the disguise, climate scientists, working with army engineers, began to drill hundreds of feet down into the ice and bring up ice cores. The ice sheet had been built up, layer by layer, over hundreds of thousands of years. That meant that it had within it a frozen record of the past. What the scientists found in the cores astonished them. That 11,000 years before, there had been a sudden cataclysmic shift. The world's temperature had changed by 10 degrees in just centuries. Other ice cores then confirmed this, that in the past there had been repeated sudden changes, both heating and cooling, of the world's climate at speeds that no one thought possible.
This piece of ice records a spectacular cooling. In fact, it's a quite new discovery for us that the Earth can turn so cold so fast. What was the reason? We don't think the volcanic eruptions did it. Maybe it was due to enormous breakouts of Antarctic ice. The problem is, could that happen?
Sorry to pause it, and at the risk of upsetting many science bros and your buddy Ben and all that, but doesn't common sense just say that it's just due to like the distance of the sun, where the Earth is in relation to the sun, that causes this? Because even though it might be, not seem that much, it could cause that. Otherwise, how do you account for it all the way through history, all the way through tens of thousands of years? It has to be to do with the sun, doesn't it?
This is this stuff here that this guy's talking about. They were called the Dansgaard Erskine events, and these are these abrupt climate shifts that Curtis is talking about. And I think one of the things is that he found legitimate evidence in ice core isotopes about the way the climate had been in the past. But one of the major objections is that was when the planet was covered in glaciers. And of course, that has somewhat ameliorated since the glaciers have more or less receded. And we live in a different, if you like, homeostasis of the climate system. So now it's difficult to make those kinds of alarmist predictions because it's based on data from a time when the planet was already very different. So the complexity of climate as it persists now is not necessarily going to be influenced by the same factors that obtained hundreds of thousands of years ago. So, see, his findings are relevant, but it's the interpretation, of course, that is the problem. You know, people debate what the triggers are for these kinds of possible climate shifts. And, you know, they suggest that, you know, the risks are exaggerated. The models don't quite, you know, match up with, you know, the present day state of our climate. So it's one of those areas where, you know, I think Curtis is using it to his advantage because he is someone who, like much of the left, as we've said before, take it as an automatic belief that the planet is in danger from climate catastrophe.
Could theoretically the sun itself burn hotter and colder in different periods?
I'd have to put that to a astrophysics expert. I don't know.
I don't see any reason why it couldn't.
I think the sun, like
it presumably has variable activity.
Like
Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not even by all measures across time.
Yeah. So why would, I mean, what I'm saying is, why would the default hypothesis from scientists be that the sun burns at a constant? I mean, maybe it just goes up and down due to different factors that are too innumerable for us to know. You know?
Isn't the idea just to alarm mankind and blame it on mankind so that the solution is more centralized globalist control over mankind?
I mean, getting into deep
doesn't really matter what's true.
Deep conspiracy.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, to me, it's just like. Yep. I mean, I remember reading this book before. I was sitting in a pub, and it was like the history of the British Islands or something like that, just like a pub book. And I started opening it, and the opening paragraph said, 8,000 years ago, most of Britain wasn't here. It was underwater, or it was part of the mainland continent. I was thinking, I was like, surely, in my mind, that would have been true a lot longer ago. And the fact it was only 8,000 years ago, I found kind of mind-blowing. So, you know, that's quite rapid change in a quite short amount of time. You know what I mean? And obviously that had nothing to do with man, is my point. Anyway.
Well, just to say that part of the this section, this thing of Camp Century, I think he's laying it. Curtis is sort of laying it in contrast with the stuff about the you know, the golf courses and the deserts. Basically, you know, the expansion in Saudi of Western management of Saudi oil resources, and there was he's kind of sort of faintly alluding to an idea that there was a new form of colonialism going on, that these Western companies were going out creating these kind of bubble societies within these repressive states in order to manage, you know, this new surge of capital interest, and similarly they were trying to sort of, you know, colonize. You know, in this case, this is part of Greenland that they're in at Camp Century, and this was an attempt to sort of colonize it, you know, for military geostrategic purposes. And in Curtis's words, this was a fantasy, you know, because it didn't work out. It lasted about 6 or 7 years, and then they realized the bases under the ice were just too unstable to be able to store nuclear missiles in. So that whole project was abandoned.
Happen again to us right now? Or could we accidentally provoke such a catastrophe? We must find the reason for this natural event long ago.
They believed that what the ice cores showed was that the idea which dominated science, that the world's climate was a stable, self-correcting system, was wrong. That it could suddenly shift into a completely different state, which would have extraordinary consequences.
Being pointed out, this is Eno, by the way, Simon.
Yes, it's not one I could identify, unfortunately. The only other, there is another track around here, though. It's actually by a group called Stars of the Lid, called "Don't Bother, They're Here," and I think that's actually the one I'm told that was playing on this one. This is when I Shazammed it. So if it's Eno, I'm contesting it with another piece. But if it is Eno,
it's either going to be Eno, Burial, John Carpenter, Nine Inch Nails, or what's the other one he loves? Aphex Twin.
Yeah. Interested to know the piece in the chat if somebody objects, but I've been told it's called "Don't Bother, They're Here" by Stars of the Lid. This is the Golden Gate Cemetery. This was from the Mossman documentary that we saw in the last episode, and it's just interesting to appreciate the scale of these American war cemeteries. You know, the biggest war cemetery we have in the UK is about 5,000 interments. That one cemetery there is 143,000 interments.
I saw one once. I think I was driving from New York down to Washington, DC, on that stretch of road. We did a trip and we passed through Philadelphia, did the Rocky Steps and all that. It was that kind of trip, and it went on for miles. It was mind-blowing. Like those, they go on for miles.
Yeah,
and it is kind of pardon the pun, but like kind of grave, kind of like somber. You're watching all these dead bodies. It's just something.
It is slightly different in the US because the policy over there means that veterans can also there's eligibility for some of their family members to be buried in them as well. So sometimes you get multiple people in plots, or but just the sort of sheer scale is worthy of thinking about in terms of the sacrifice of the US to war.
Richard Nixon came to power because he had harnessed a new force. He called it the silent majority. They were the people in the suburbs that were rapidly growing around every city in America. But it was a fragile power base, because it wasn't like the old collective power that had driven political parties in the past. It was millions of individuals who not only felt isolated and alone, but also increasingly fearful of the chaos in America as a result of the Vietnam War.
We were sitting in the living room watching the Miss Ohio pageant, and all of a sudden I heard a smack at the front, and I run out, and then I heard something hit a window here in the back. And I tore around the driveway here, and I looked all over, but I didn't see a thing. I didn't see one guy. You know, you can put up with this crap just so long, and then pow, somebody's gonna get it.
Pause. Just to say, this period is interesting. This is the kind of thing I may have alluded to last time, or in my last set of tweets about when we did the previous episode, that this is the kind of period that's sort of best, what's the word? The best emblem of this is probably the film Network from 1976, which is a few years later. The footage we're seeing there is Nixon campaigning in Atlanta in October of 1968, and he was basically tapping into a lot of anxiety about law and order and trying to get to Middle America because of the sort of instability, protests, and division around Vietnam, but also about things like urban breakdown and crime. And there's the great Peter Finch speech in Network about how people are being threatened at every turn, whether it's by sort of criminality or whether it's by the sort of incursion of corporates into their life, and then they just want to be left alone. So there's a great sort of resonance and similarity here. He was very popular with whites. When he was going around campaigning, blacks were a bit more cautious, but he was trying to kind of win over the Southern Democrats, who were quite alienated from the National Party at this stage, and he was trying to get to those people, I suppose, that Nigel Farage is trying to get to now. The so-called silent majorities.
The Donald Trump voter.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely. Go on, Horace. Sorry.
But Nixon made heavy use of the phrase "the great silent majority." He was known for using that.
Yeah. And there are some. I mean, do you remember young? Turnip? He was a big Nixon fan, or at least a Nixon. There's a kind of culture in some parts of the American right of. I mean, Paul Gottfried is kind of from this, and Pat Buchanan and some of the guys who write for Chronicles magazine, of saying that like Nixon was stitched up, that he's misunderstood, that Watergate was a kind of a regime kind of, and this was like the last attempt of like the true American right to do something, and it was kind of done in, and then you got the Reagan Buckleyite neocon thing that happened after that. So that it was kind of like a takeover of the Republican Party by the forces of the people who wanted to marry libertarian economics with hawkish foreign policy. That was the Reagan settlement. So there, I mean, what I'm saying is Nixon has still got defenders in parts of the American right.
Funnily enough, when a couple of years ago, when Ferro and our friends did the exhibition in London, art exhibition, Yarvin came along, and I was just standing near him on the street outside while people were having fags and drinks and things like that, and I noticed he was wearing an English cricket jumper, and about halfway down the jumper, not in the usual place you would wear like a badge, but almost like on his stomach, he had an old vintage Nixon pin, a Nixon campaign pin, which said Nixon now more than ever.
Right. Yeah. So
from the time, right?
A vintage one, yeah.
Not someone trying to revive Nixon now. In some way.
Well, he'd struggle.
Did you guys see that Curtis Yarvin was on BBC Newsnight?
Yeah, I did see that. In fact, I did a video on Yarvin with Todd Lewis. Wanted to talk about him, so I ended up doing a video talking, reassessing the legacy of NRX, because Todd Lewis now believes that it was a psyop all along. I'm not sure if I believe that, but certainly there are some questions to ask of old Yarvin. I would suggest.
Yeah, like why are they all right with him? Why is he not verboten? Why is he not non grata from?
Yeah, especially given that he's like arguing for monarchy and like an end of democracy and things like this. Yeah.
I think the BBC interviewer was kind of able to, let's say, work with his very digressive quality and kind of dilute any ability for him to make any kind of point, which, as we know at the best of times, is something which he does over a kind of a course of a protracted monologue, which is difficult to bottle.
He's kind of insinuated himself into like British centre-left circles through his well, no, this is bizarre, but he actually, because he did a debate with Alistair Campbell of all people, and he appeared on a bill with quite a lot of people that I've cited and read, like the philosopher John Gray was on that same review. So quite how or why is anybody's guess. I mean, maybe he's got an agent or something, but he's somehow got into the same like the unheard circuit, I guess you call it. I don't know.
What a circuit. Talking of people being incorporated from the sort of the ostensible right into the left or whatever, Nick Fuentes also has been profiled in the New York Times not long ago. And Warren Balogh sort of listed all the stuff, that like reasons to think that Nick Fuentes has made some sort of deal, some sort of, I don't know, there's some sort of understanding where he's partly incorporated. I mean, he is partly incorporated now, right? He's on mainstream stuff. I mean, it's fairly hostile, but he's kind of been brought in. And obviously he supported the action to kidnap Maduro. Under the pretext of the Monroe Doctrine, obviously.
So we think that are they trying to do a sort of an Ash Sarkar style containment? You bring them in as a kind of curiosity for them to say something flip and outrageous now and again, but then they gradually settle into being, upstanding supporters of the BBC.
I mean, the thing is with this is that, I mean, there could be all sorts of reasons why, I'll give you an example. Okay. I don't believe that Steve Laws works for anyone, right? put it that way. I don't believe that. But I do believe that there could be a reason why Andrew Gold and who was the other one? Liam Tufts. Of all the people online decided, right, we're going to elevate this one.
Yeah.
Because it makes a dialectic, right? It makes a dialectic. And now when people talk about nationalism or British nationalism, he is now being like made the face of it, if that makes any sense. Okay. Now I don't believe that the person necessarily needs cooperation for that. All they need to do is to accept the invitation, right? But that doesn't necessarily. Do you understand what I mean? It's like, well, they can make decisions as to it doesn't necessarily mean they're being brought in. It could be used that it's just like, well, that's useful as the counterpoint. Because it's somebody for them to point to. And I feel like with Fuentes, there's a similar thing that they decided to do. Right, we need a face of anti-Semitism. It's going to be this dude. We need a face of like British racism. It's going to be this dude, right? And they do that. Now in the case of Nick, I believe that could backfire a little bit because he is charismatic and funny. So, i.e., they can put him in the spot, but he may make more of that spot, and it could like backlash on them, if that makes any sense.
You're right. Piers Morgan was very open about this idea of, people say that I don't get the opposition on my show, so I'm going to go through an arc of getting the opposition on my show. And yes, he started off with people like Dan Bilzerian, and that sort of seemed very pyrotechnic. But then, he's gradually taken a bunch of people on the assumption that he can do the old classic, I'll give them the rope and they'll hang themselves trick.
I also don't believe on this particular point, people have always, quick to throw out fair accusations and things like that. Okay, and I've done so in the past myself with various individuals, but sometimes they do it over strange things, right? So the fact that Nick and Richard Spencer have come out in support of this Venezuelan action, right, is not in and of itself. It's just a take, right? It's just a take. I don't understand the logic that says because you have this take, therefore you must work for the government. Because my thinking would tend towards more, if the government was going to fund anyone, it would be the most obnoxious, kind of like goose stepping. Do you know what I mean? Like the modus operandi of the kind of like they tend towards like the I mean, if it was in this country, it'd be like the person who's encouraging, bashing of like actual like violence and things like that tends to be that person, not the one who's like trying to argue about the Monroe Doctrine or something. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
So
I think.
Go on, Horace.
I think, Steve, it may be true that there could be some strategy from above where it's useful to them to somehow present Steve in some way. I could see that. But I would point out that Liam Tufts and Andrew Gold are not Newsnight or the New York Times.
That's also true. That's also true.
With Fuentes specifically, he is not clearly an ethno-nationalist. I know he's sort of counted as one, but he is like an American nationalist, right? Which is something of a grey area. He says a lot of ethno implying things, but I could see why they would want to put, if you're going to have somebody representing the ethnic position, which they feel forced to concede, he's good because he's confused. And obviously he's Hispanic. He mixes in Catholic stuff, which confuses the message. He's got a lot of foreign, mixed race or other race supporters, it seems. Yeah. He's got a lot of annoying supporters as well. He's an annoying prick. That it kind of helps. It kind of works for him. I agree that he is also good on his feet. He's got a brain for debates and stuff. He's good at that. But and he's divisive among nationalists as well. That's another useful thing.
My sense, though, Horace, is that if there's a decision to elevate him, right, it's not because they want to make him the face of ethno-nationalism. Okay, it is because they want to make him the face of anti-Semitism in particular, right? Of anti-Semitism in particular. And I've noticed that when they do this, it tends to be positions that they think that they can battle against. Like, so the fact that he's Christian, The fact that he's a Christian, like the Catholic Christian element, or the Candice Owens, right? These are the one. This is the form of quote unquote anti-Semitism that they. It's never like the Kevin McDonald. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. It's always a certain form that tends to get those, because I think that they back themselves to win in that argument, right, against Nick. Now they could miscalculate that because I think he has a special talent, but I think that that's probably the thinking from the New York Times and so on and so forth.
And I've seen talk in some spaces of attempts to kind of, if you take someone like Steve Laws, but, you might say, well, we don't want Steve Laws, but we want to capture his audience. And there's talk of sort of changing some of the taxonomy and saying, well, perhaps we need to counter this ethno-nationalism by talking instead about ethno-majoritarianism, which has less of the kind of unsavory perceptions of ethno-nationalism.
For exactly that same reason, though, I give credit to Steve and whoever is sort of getting their face out there with the hardcore message. It's like uncompromising, just everyone of any other races or even half British people is saying they've got to go. I think it's valuable to have that because even Carl, who's counter-signaled Steve somewhat. I mean, not. I don't think Carl's completely against him, but he's criticised him somewhat, criticised his position. He and others at the Lotus Eaters, just for one example, and all over other places on GB News and all sorts of places, they're provoked to take a position and say, well, how far would you go? You wouldn't go as far as Steve, but how far would you go? That does kind of advance the debate in the right direction, I think. And so Simon, you said there, obviously they find themselves wanting to put forward an ethno-majoritarian, but that is something of a concession. They have that is a retreat.
I also think that for the people who put themselves in that set, who advance the most extreme position, it's fraught with a lot of risk. I'll just put it that way, because I think it's easy to isolate and be made how can I put this? Okay, so online in writer circles, you might think, well, Andrew Gold is getting his arse handed to him. He's being ratioed on Twitter and so on. But take it out into the country, and it won't be that hard for Andrew Gold to seem like the reasonable voice. And I've got a feeling that is why. I mean, that's why they do these things in the first place. They always want a face that then they can feel reasonable again. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but after the Fuentes interview, that Finkelstein guy went all over the BBC, and he was like, didn't Andrew Gold also go on the BBC or GB News or something complaining about
GB News,
right? So it was kind of like mirror these two interviews, the Piers Morgan one and the Andrew Gold one with Laws. There's a mirror, because they both Andrew Gold and Danny Finkelstein then went onto more traditional media to moan, right, about the treatment they'd had. But I think that the reason they do it in the first place is because they think they can win that argument.
Yes, because the problem Steve Laws faces is kind of expressed in the familiarity we have with, the Tommy Robinson, Douglas Murray dichotomy that's been much talked of over the years. Well, look at Douglas Murray. He's saying the same things as Tommy Robinson, but he went to Eton and he does it in a posh voice. So for Steve, there isn't a correlate that does that.
Douglas Murray was well connected before he even said a word about anything.
Exactly, yeah. So... But I don't know, it just seems custom made for newspapers to stick his face on a page and be like vile racist, and then they love that word, vile.
I agree with you there, but I just think that doesn't matter anymore. Just nobody gives a shit about that. It just does not work. I think things have. And the other thing I would say to the same effect is that I go on Facebook. I kind of do this just to keep in touch with people I've got no other connection with. What I mean is, I'm on political groups on it, and I just keep dropping in figures like 20 million. I was just saying total immigrant stuff. It's actually beyond my own position in my own mind, but I do it to see what reaction I'll get. And it's now it's heavily in my favour. And I'm talking about not just political groups, local community groups. The other day, I just put in a comment saying 20 million people need to go back to their homeland. And I got 2 people replying saying, "Oh, come on, that's ridiculous. That collapsed the NHS," or whatever. And I got 10 likes. And 5 years ago, it was the opposite. It was no likes, usually, because people were afraid. It's when we call normies, I've said this all over the place, the people we refer to as normies and dismiss as like a grey mass, they are nonetheless sometimes much more hardcore than us political people. It's funny.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, I've seen it happen in Wales to some extent because, I mean, one of the things that you can't underestimate is that even if the internet wasn't there, when an actual small town starts to transform, that does have a massive effect on the locals, and they become very quickly like, yeah, we must get rid of them immediately. So I would agree that there's been a shift in it. I still, I mean, I'm going to go on this thing, Mark's channel tomorrow, and Woes, I think, has agreed to go on there, where I'll be talking about this more. How can I put this? I just feel like it gets you onto a whole debate that you don't need to have, right? And it just seems like, okay, we want to start reducing the foreign population, especially like after Boris wave and so on and so forth. But with Steve, you very quickly get into like, I mean, the tweet that always sticks with me, Boris, right, is Aaron Bastani saying like, what about Frank Bruno? What about Paul Ince? What about darling old Paul Ince, you know? And it's like, okay, but now we have to go and have that conversation. It's actually a really difficult conversation to have. Do you know what I mean?
Paul Ince was dirty. Frank Bruno was quite beloved. But Paul Ince was dirty. West Ham fans in particular.
Paul Ince because he had a lot of red cards. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like, but you're now having a really like quite different conversation, and I don't know. I'm still dubious as to, you know, it just feels like just giving too many automatic reasonable points to the opposition,
but it's not
up front.
But I think it clears space for the rest of the right, though. In a way, it's like everyone else can look reasonable while still being much more hardcore than they were 2 years ago. You know, because they're not as extreme as they're not as uncompromising as Steve.
But I think what AA is talking about is you know, they're betting on certain things, and in my view, those certain things are activating the kind of hidden levers, if you know, if I can call it, in what is called the British personality of activating notions like fair play and so on, and that will then neutralize. You know, you can sort of gin the people up so far, but then you've got to be fair, mate. You know,
I mean, I think they're setting up for a Tommy Steve Law showdown at some point, right? And I mean, I'd be really surprised if that doesn't happen, because it's, come on, pro wrestling, man. It's the box office, it's the main event in British right wing politics now. It has to happen. But I already know that when Tommy comes out with, what about my mate Footlong and all of that sort of stuff, there'll be a large group of people, like the 100,000. Yeah, I know you're laughing, but the 100,000 people who went to that fucking rally will watch that, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, bless him, Footlong, mate. Yeah, I'll fight for you," and all this sort of stuff. And it just may not go.
Died in the holly, you know.
It just may not go the way that people imagine when it comes to this whole debate, because there's a network effect. And I'm just thinking now, like in real life, of, you know, parents of some of the parents of the you know, in the school and so on, and you know, just the idea that someone who's been in the country for 70 years is now good, and that automatically all those other people are just going to side with them. See what I mean? And it's just this is the sort of thing I worry about.
I don't think it's like that anymore. I think what people will do is they'll look at Tommy as the sort of leftist in that debate, Steve as the rightist in that debate, and loads of them will try and choose the middle position, which they think, you know, it's reasonable to give 6 of one and after. But that's much to the right of where it would have been a few years ago. And basically, Tommy loses from having that debate. That's why he's avoiding it. And Steve gains because some of the people, rather than none.
But wouldn't Tommy just concede that? Wouldn't Tommy just concede that up front, though? Wouldn't he just say, yeah, a lot of them do have to, a lot of the recent newcomers do have to leave?
Yeah, he has been making concessionary sounds towards Steve Laws recently as well. You know, I get what he's saying, I agree with him, etc.
Yeah, he's never consistent. He's always...
He's right, rather than I agree with him, I should say.
Okay, well, I'll think about it. I still think that the Steve path is fraught with danger. And if, I mean, I'm not going to say, like, if you want to go along those lines, that's fine. But I sense danger in that direction for people.
What did this have to do with Richard Nixon? I can't remember.
So we want America safe. It's on the screen there.
The silent majority, right?
Yeah.
Speaking coming back to the 70s, one of the songs that people may not do you remember there was like jazz musician Jimmy Smith? You know, he's known for like his organ tunes in the 60s and so on.
Okay.
He's got one record that was a vocal record. Like, he doesn't usually sing, but he does sing. It's called Jimmy Smith in a Brown Paper Bag, and the opening track is called Recession or Depression. It was recorded in 1971, and I always think that song, Recession or Depression, which name checks Spurious Agnew, gets across a sense of what Curtis is, the kind of slight paranoia in the air, the sense that things aren't going that well in the country. You know, I think it was in the air in the early 70s, late 60s, wasn't it?
Sorry, it's Spyro Agnew. Did you call him Spurious Agnew? That's quite funny.
No, well, Spyro Agnew, but on the song he sings I think he calls him Spiro Agnew. You know, it's
so it's when
an African American gentleman, Jimmy Smith. But it's a good song. It's a good song. But one of Jimmy Smith's less known albums, In a Brown Paper Wrapper, is called. But anyway, let's carry on.
There are those who say, how do we answer those who engage in violence? How do we answer those who try to shout down a speaker? And my answer...
What sort of name is Spyro, anyway? Is it a Greek name?
It sounds it, doesn't it?
I know there's the only other person called Spyro I know is a 70s wrestler called what was it, Spyros Arion? His name's Spyros though. Spyros Arion. Maybe Spyro Agnew is the only person of that name ever. So there we are.
There was a group in Spyro Carpets, wasn't there? In the 90s. Sorry.
Tenuous.
Is don't answer in kind. It's time for the great silent majority just to stand up and be counted.
Nixon promised to represent the silent majority. But the truth was that he was also uncertain and frightened too, just like them. Nixon had been to see a psychiatrist about his feelings of dread. He told the psychiatrist that when he looked in the mirror in the morning, it was as if there was no one there.
Pause. So I think this is, people may remember some of this from the little short Nixon film that Curtis did that we reviewed eons back. And he alludes to this thing about Nixon looking in the mirror, seeing no one there. I think he's being a bit naughty there because I couldn't find any reference anywhere to that at all. What I did find, and Curtis may be alluding to this, there was a short story published in the Miami New Times back in April 1994, just after Nixon died, by a chap called Michael Dolan. And he writes a short story from the point of view of Nixon having just died, and he kind of, it's the kind of, he wakes up, as it were, sees his dead body on the bed, and he leaves, his spirit leaves his body, and he goes wandering off around New York. He died in the hospital in New Jersey. And there's a line in there which alludes to this idea of looking in the mirror and not seeing anything there, because he's dead. He's not there anymore. So I think that's what it's been ripped out of. But I couldn't find anything that actually alluded to that. Nixon did have a psychotherapist called Dr. Hutschnecker, who treated him from the 50s, and talked about Nixon as basically being an emotionally deprived child. He said he essentially thought that Nixon dealt with the fact that he was emotionally deprived by kind of rejecting love out of his personality. He thought it was a diversion that would kind of deplete his political energy, and so what he would do is kind of keep that private sort of self well away and out of public view, and kind of in denial. And so this suggests that he kind of perceived a sort of a void inside himself, where, his real priority was kind of to have power and to be admired. So there was often references to him being hollow, or very much an outsider. And the Oliver Stone film shows a lot of that sort of anxiety and neurosis. At the same time, there was a dimension of Nixon that was kind of, fairly, I wouldn't say Machiavellian, but he knew the deal. If you wanted to be powerful, you kind of had to displace your personal wishes and deal with the world as it was. And he, obviously saw it in a certain kind of way.
Did you ever watch that Nixon tapes thing, Simon?
Which one? What, the comedy one, like Nixon's the One, or the actual?
No. There was like a BBC documentary.
All right.
Because Nixon was a bit of a psycho, wasn't he? He kind of taped himself, taped hours and like every single meeting. It's all on tape. It's all. I mean, famously, there's the one where he's ranting down the phone about the you-know-who's.
Yeah.
And like Henry Kissinger's on the line.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what? And then Kissinger's like, yeah, I agree, boss. There, I fucking hate them as well. He's like, what? Huh?
But he used to have conversations with Haldeman, his chief of staff, talking about how Washington was, full of them, and most of them are disloyal. And but then he would also be recorded. He would say you can't trust them; they turn on you. But then he would sort of, he'd deny he was. Against them, so to speak. He said, if anybody who's been in this chair ever had reason to be anti-Semitic, I did, and I'm not. You know what I mean?
I mean, if you watch that, it's so, I mean, spicy is not the word, because it's not just them. It's every, like he literally goes on whole rants, full on N-word, the spics and all this sort of stuff. It's like, the guy is like a full on racist.
There's a good comedy version.
He was along in the wrong era. He should have been along on like the Elon Musk's Twitter. He would have had a massive following.
If people remember Spinal Tap, Harry Shearer, who plays Derek Smalls, he does a show called Nixon's the One, and it was a sort of semi-dramatization of Nixon in the Oval Office, and they do the dialogue from the Nixon tapes, and it's kind of filmed as if there's a CCTV camera in the office actually, witnessing all of this stuff, and they play out all these scenarios. I mean, it's very funny. Search it out if you can. Nixon himself he's interesting in talking about, again, his private, his political personality. He said, even with close friends, I don't believe in letting your hair down, confiding this and that and the other thing, saying, gee, I couldn't sleep, etc., etc. He says, I believe you should keep your troubles to yourself. That's just the way I am. Some people are different. Some people think it's good therapy to sit with a close friend and, just spill your guts, reveal their inner psyche, whether they were breastfed or bottle fed. Not me. No way. He was told that most Americans felt they didn't know him, even at the end of his career. And he replied, yeah, it's true. And it's not necessary for them to know.
Based. That's funny because, on Windows computers now, right? I've got two different laptops and my desktop, which I'm recording this on. There's that little pop-up that like by the Windows sign, and it's really fucking annoying. But it kind of like nudges things at you, like little articles and little news stories and so on. It nudged one at me yesterday, and it was like men over 30 who don't have any friends, who've given up on love. Here are 20 things they tell themselves. And then it was like it was nudging me over to this Zen site,
right?
About like mindfulness.
You've been there, done that.
It like mindfulness and like here are the characteristics you should look for, and there's somebody here to listen to you and talk about your emotions and all this sort of stuff. And it was interesting because I went down the list and was like, yeah, me. But then when I went through to the thing and it was just like, this bloke talking to an old woman, I was like, yeah, fuck it. I'm with Nixon. I'm with Nixon. Don't talk about it. I'm happy being antisocial. I'm fine with it. I'm absolutely fine with it. But it was like, how is my computer worked out that I'm this dude? And why is it trying to nudge me to become a homosexual? It was kind of one of those freaky moments.
Yeah. This is just Nixonian paranoia that you're getting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly like Nixon. You don't want to hear my private tapes, I tell you.
What are you saying, Horace?
About the taping? No, just you'll turn into one of those people who wears tie-dye and wears like crystals or whatever. No, about the taping thing. Nixon, in the movie, I assume this is accurate. What's his name? J. Edgar Hoover says to him, "You should never have stopped the taping." As in, Johnson had, I think, everyone back to like Truman or Eisenhower. They all recorded conversations in the Oval Office and maybe elsewhere routinely, and Nixon stopped it when he got in, and then J. Edgar Hoover persuaded him to start using it again, the taping system in the White House. So it was a standard thing for several presidents before him. So
how come there aren't like JFK tapes and things like that then?
Good question.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear.
Is it just like
JFK Unchained? Dropping the M-bomb and being like, I don't like him either. And talking about the secret societies and all of that.
I mean, is it just that like historians and the media generally conspire to portray Kennedy much better? I don't know.
Interesting.
There would have been tapes. There must be tapes.
He was also suspicious and paranoid. Nixon was convinced that there was a conspiracy by what he called the liberal establishment to destroy him.
He was absolutely right about that, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was absolutely correct.
I'll quote what I quoted last time from Curtis himself about 15 years ago when he talked about this mindset. And the world Nixon was in. Curtis rejects conspiracies generally, but he does talk in terms of vested interests. And what he said about this sort of theme is, if you live in a market idea of society of it is all and only individuals, or it's a quote Google idea of democracy, for example, individuals connected in a web forming an appearance of a consent structure, if you introduce the idea of powerful vested interests using ideas to manipulate thoughts or change behavior or move you around, it offends that mindset. And then people can only frame it as conspiracy. So disruptive is the notion that societies can be operated by anything other than individual will, when the sense of agency is so embedded.
By the way, I have found the thing that popped up on my computer. Do you want to see it? Show you this. This is so sinister when you look at it. This popped up. Men who have no close friends often do these 20 things, right? Zen Kind, that was the site. I tick all 20 of these boxes, by the way. But if you go down, Gary Economic. Look at what is pushing on it. Gary Economics is the next one.
Yeah.
And then, this is what mainstream culture is pushing on you. Like endless Gary Economics.
Gary's Economics is the new Jordan Peterson in the YouTube auto load, isn't it? Every video will eventually end with Gary's Economics.
Well, I'd love to have a boost from having my videos featured on MSN.com auto pop up on my fucking Windows. Have you watched this academic agent video? Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
That'll be 100,000 views for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway,
gosh,
but, Zen Kind. I'm going along next Tuesday to talk to Mavis about my feelings.
But this is not a cry for help, is it? You are actually saying you have no friends and you don't want any close friends.
Well, I mean, I do. The thing is, I do have friends.
Right.
But if you have a look, it's things like, if you click on what are the 20 things that men do, it'd be like, they make an arrangement and then they pull out at the last minute, or they only talk about surface level stuff. It's not. They cancel plans at the last minute. They never initiate contact first. They stay at home instead of accepting invitations.
Yeah.
Don't share personal problems with anyone.
It's okay to do all of that.
They keep conversations focused on other people. They work excessively to avoid free time. They drift away from after major life changes, like having kids, basically. They joke their way out of serious conversations. They compete instead of connecting. I have a competition in me, as you know.
They don't like debates.
They scroll social media instead of reaching out. Reaching out means like, talking to someone about your problems.
Yeah.
They only see people in group settings, like when I met you guys in London, if you remember.
Yeah. They only do spreadsheets.
So I mean, I was like, the thing is though, if you have a look at the images, it treats it as if these guys are depressed and suffering and lonely or like hurting inside or something.
Yeah.
I'm not any of those things. I just, after you're a certain age, it's a fucking faff.
Yeah.
You must know where I'm coming from, Simon. You must.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. I mean, I noticed. I've said this before. I noticed this in my YouTube feed as well. It puts lots of things like videos of cats and kittens and stuff being or animals being adorable, because I think it thinks I'm kind of sort of emotionally so arid and bitter and resentful, which I am, that I need to be softened by this. But it's the algorithm taking your preferences and then saying which ones are pathological and feeding that back to you.
Mate, it's all right. You can reach out. We can go together. Let's go to Zen life together, Simon.
It's okay to hate.
What was that? Do you remember it, mate? Remember the
That's it, mate. Yeah.
Hey, it's all right to talk about the feelings, mate. That's out of order. Come on, mate. Let's
genuinely, I think
economics together, mate.
It probably is the algorithm triangulating, because it's noticing that people, like we were talking about the issues with ethno-nationalism earlier on. It recognizes there's a great need in people to have their opinions socially ratified as agreeable. Ed Dutton will probably talk about a lot of this kind of thing. People want to be perceived to be agreeable, so they will give in to value, sort of cliches like fair play and things like that. And what this is recognizing the fact that a lot of people are withdrawing inwards. They are becoming self-sufficient, and that's being recognized as pathological. We want to bring them back in now, so we have to fix you.
Exactly. So have you considered doing Tai Chi, losing weight, and going along and talking to a random woman about your feelings? If Richard Nixon was along now, maybe he'd be some sort of Zen guru doing stuff like that. Well, he'd be captured by all of this sort of stuff.
Is it Marco Pierre White? It's already giving us all we need.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? Marco Pierre White, when he's doing his things, one of his refrains is, cooking is the best therapy.
He could think. He could be deployed to de-radicalize all of the Steve Laws cohort.
But what I'm saying is, though, Marco Pierre White does it in a masculine way. He's like, right, I get time to myself. It's quiet. I can concentrate. Cooking is the best therapy. He's not saying go and talk about your feelings to a group of random strangers and hug it out like fucking Meatloaf in Fight Club. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, I had a theory about this, that because I was moaning on Twitter earlier in the week about seeing the new version of Amadeus and how awful it is, because they're trying to sort of add in elements whereby the main characters kind of are so degrading themselves. And I theorized that, with a lot of the kind of left liberals who are doing these kinds of taking stories and rewriting them in this way, a lot of their belief is about the therapeutic effect of embarrassing yourself, humiliating yourself in public, acting out your shame. There's a scene in there where Salieri decides to pleasure himself over the pianoforte, over the pianoforte, and it just sort of degraded the character. And it feels like everything they do is to kind of draw your attention to, disgust response kinds of scenarios. And there's a sort of theory, I think, they think if they kind of if they expose themselves, it's like, you know, if they stand naked in public, they'll get over their body consciousness, and then they'll kind of find enlightenment and catharsis from that. So they repeatedly kind of punch the bruise of their own sense of shame about things. And you socialize your problems in that way, and you encourage everybody else to socialize their problems, so that everybody exploits and exhibits their shame, and therefore that makes it all okay, and you can feel better. You know,
now we're talking about this, I've remembered the other reason that Fuentes is pushed a little bit by mainstream media. It's not only the face of anti-Semitism. The mainstream media are obsessed, and I mean obsessed, with the idea of the incel. And the common refrain is that the Groypers are all incels, and the Nick is a virgin, and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's a kind of talking point. So there's this way of presenting his audience as a problem to be fixed.
Yeah.
Right? Why are these men opting out? Why aren't they in clubs having sex like we used to? Or how can they be happy to be quote unquote incels? Why do they have this bitter misogyny? Like, these are all like for the New York Times journalist, they fucking love this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Everything about the go on, Horace.
No, go on.
No, you please do.
Well, just the incel thing, I just noticed better part of 10 years ago, maybe just after Charlottesville, something like that. Like, I just noticed the incel thing became the object of, you know, those certain type of journalists who work with Antifa, but not only Antifa, the black blocs. I mean, like the whole anti-fascist panoply, like people, academics and stuff. The term there's this field in academia, but it ties into the state and NGOs and stuff, called CVE, right? Countering Violent Extremism. Incels became one of their main categories of extremists to tackle, along with like Islamic extremists and white nationalists and stuff. They tie it together with white nationalists anyway. And like it's part of a sort of a pretext for state activity, among other things, you know. If you can say there's incels on this forum, that's a terrorist forum or whatever, you know. And it ties in with all that research, that supposed research that comes out of the CVE field. So it conduces to their narratives as well.
Yeah,
I'm talking about, there's a whole range of these groups all over the world, like, like ISD.
Yeah, so he also ticks that box for them as well. So, I mean, you'll notice that they never foreground someone who's like married with kids, who's well adjusted. You know, it's do you know what I mean? Like, it's they choose certain figures to elevate, but it's like, yes, it's less of a story if the guy is just a bit boring or whatever. It's not sensational. It's not click worthy. You know what I mean?
I think that's another reason why they won't be able to use Steve Laws the same way that they maybe are using Nick Fuentes, because Steve is like a family man. He's like he's been a dad since he was really young. Like, I think he's had his first kid in his early 20s. He's got 4 children. He's just obviously like an upstanding father who provides for his family and stuff. And it just doesn't fit. He's not a freak. He's really ordinary.
They won't have that angle on him for sure.
No,
I mean,
they're trying to ignore that. Yeah.
It resonates oddly when, if you remember an episode or two back, when they were talking about the Baader Meinhof, and the way that they explicitly embrace this sort of theology of violence plus sexual liberation. You know, that sexual liberation, effing and shooting are the same thing. It's all part of emancipating yourself from the system, that you become sexually more available.
Just like the Weather Underground, they did exactly the same thing. They smashing monogamy. I think I mentioned this on the previous episode. Like, smashing monogamy meant basically compulsory orgies. I mean, it wasn't exactly compulsory, but I mean, people got frozen out more or less if they didn't join in the orgies, and that carried on for some weeks or months in their sort of like one of their extreme sort of acceleration phases in like about 1970. And then just after a few weeks of doing that, obviously everyone just had STDs. Like, open, like someone, one of the members in the documentary just says, I saw like this woman I was shagging, I think, like, it just said I could see crabs in her eyebrows.
Oh, fucking hell.
Right. And he said, like, I'm not doing this anymore. Let's just not do the smash monogamy thing. And they just stopped doing the orgies. But yeah, they had the same thing.
All right, let's go. This is all a very long way to go around the houses to say that Richard Nixon needed therapy. Is that right? Something like that.
In 1971, he told his aides to start what he called the enemies list. It included dozens of liberal journalists, academics, and even film stars. Nixon had a tape machine running all the time in the White House, and on it he left a record of this paranoia.
And also, never forget, the press is the enemy. The press is the enemy. The establishment is the enemy. The professors are the enemy. The professors are the enemy. Write that in the blackboard 100 times.
So based.
Problem?
Yeah, that's powerful based.
Unbelievably based.
And never forget, the establishment is the enemy. The establishment is the enemy.
Repeat it, simplify, repeat it every day. Fucking brilliant.
If you're pushing it an open door, you're not a radical.
But Nixon soon found that the chaos created by the Vietnam War was also going to start.
Promo code Shawjan, by the way. That's Shawjan. Promo code Shawjan. 25% off all courses right now. Promo code Shawjan.
Sorry, yes, Yarvin himself understands repetition, doesn't he? Because he says short. It's like, not in rhythm with the tune, but you know. That's how when you interview him, he just kept saying sure.
And so sure.
Sure, Jan.
Can you command a comma like? Anyway, pick up the courses today.
Stop him delivering the new stable America that he had promised. The cost of the war was huge, and America was deeply in debt. In 1971, it forced Nixon to give up one of the great symbols of America's global power, the control of all the world's currencies. Ever since the Second World War, the value of all currencies in the world had been fixed to the dollar. They were backed by the gold reserves held in Fort Knox. But then overnight, Nixon let that go. And suddenly, there was no fixed value for any currency anywhere in the world.
What was that mark, John? 838, 843. 838, 43.
This makes Nixon a terrible villain in libertarian land, though, doesn't it, Horace? He's responsible for decoupling the dollar from the gold standard.
It's like it was called the gold window. It was the last remnant vestige of the gold standard. But I think we've talked about this before. You should have taken my views on board, really. But like the gold standard was killed by the First World War. During the First World War, it was never really restored afterwards. They restored it to a gold exchange standard, which only applied to bullion of a certain size. So basically, gold ceased to be convertible, except for people dealing in bars of gold, which is hardly anyone. That was after the First World War. So yeah, basically, but the libertarians are not pro the Bretton Woods arrangement. They may say that the ending of it after 71 was worse. Sure. I think Rothbard said if you're going to have international, if you're forced to choose what arrangement you want for international currency values against each other, and you're not going to have a gold standard because you find that too restrictive or whatever. He said fixed currency exchange rates were better. Rothbard said, and he was Mr. Libertarian. So he probably would have said the Bretton Woods system was better than what came after.
I remember that there was that website, wasn't there? What happened after 1971? Do you remember it? I remember I interviewed the authors of this website called "What WTF Happened in 1971," because there's that productivity graph they always show, and there's all sorts of metrics go haywire after 1971. But anyway, go on, Horace.
Well, just for people who've been watching the whole of this Curtis review series, Curtis returns to themes of financial changes and the growing power of finance as he sees it in several of his documentaries, right? Especially the Mayfair set was one. I'd just say, people who remember the Mayfair set and some of the others, this ties back into that because this was when the Bretton Woods system had obtained since I think 45 or 46, the end of the Second World War. It's part of the settlement of the Second World War, and that was every so the pound was just fixed at something like $2.40 to £1, something like that, and that was fixed for 26 years. And then after, like, I don't know exactly what happened, like why Nixon did this or what decisions it forced on all the other countries and stuff. But what happened after this was floating exchange rates, which means it's just the dollar is traded against the Canadian dollar, which is traded against the Deutschmark and so on. This was a consideration for the European communities as well, because they already, I think, well before 1971, already had the idea of a single European currency. Certainly, when Edward Heath sort of, I don't know what the word was, like joined Britain into the EEC without a referendum. For everyone who doesn't remember that, the referendum was 4 years after. He was, I think, on the day that the act that took us into the EEC went through Parliament. This is mentioned in the documentary "The Poisoned Chalice," if anyone wants to see it. There was a paper seen on Heath's desk, which was, I think, the basis of a report of a conversation he'd had with one of the EU figures, maybe Georges Pompidou of France, something like that, where Heath, like, this was on paper, like Heath was saying, we're also going to work towards this, and this, basically full European Union in every way, full federalism. And it included a European single currency then. Like he had already agreed to that verbally with other European leaders. Treasonously, really. I mean, I don't think he had the authority. But anyway, like between 71 and the Maastricht Agreement, which is when they formally started working towards the euro, as became, at the end of the 90s, there was various attempts to deal with this, because there seems to be constant crises from floating exchange rates, or at least crisis for one or two countries at a time. And you had things like the currency snake, which I think was joked about on the day-to-day as the currency cat or something, the currency kitten, something like that. But you had the currency snake idea from the 70s into the 80s. You also had, like, there was some crisis in about 83 or 84 where loads of the countries of Europe and other places maybe pressured and successfully pressured America to weaken their own currency because it was becoming too strong against all the other currencies. Like, I think this might have even been like the yen and stuff as well. I don't know. And then, obviously, 92, you had Black Wednesday, or White Wednesday, as anti-EU people say, which was when, like, Britain tried to join the exchange rate mechanism and stayed within it just for a few months, and it just was a total disaster. They couldn't maintain the fixed. It was an attempt at a mutual fixed currency value agreement between about 10 countries or something, 8 or 10 countries. And it just, George Soros, among others, like blew it apart, like just bet so heavily against the value of the pound, and correctly, like bet that it would drop out of the acceptable range. Anyway, sorry, I don't know if everyone needs this much detail, but just wanted to sort of give people a picture of how this ties back into Kurtz's other documentaries and all the crises he describes, like Labour's crisis in, calling in the IMF and stuff. It's all part of that same story, that sort of, the anarchy, the currency value anarchy that's followed the last, 54 years now since this. And they remain, this was supposed to, I think it was intended by some people to be temporary, but this, it remains the case, like currencies trade at the whim of the market, really.
Now, I remember Trump saying he was going to go back into Fort Knox and check on the gold. Did that happen?
I think before this is the thing that libertarians always call for, like Ron Paul and people have called for, like, can we audit Fort Knox and the whole Federal Reserve System, I think. But yeah, Fort Knox needs to be audited, maybe empty.
Trump said he was going to do it. Did he though?
Does he ever?
Tucker.
That's definitely, I mean, maybe that was when he was buddying around with Elon Musk more, but it was definitely on the 2024 ticket that he was going to audit Fort Knox. How hard can that be?
Libertarians, probably, right? Trump spoke at a Libertarian Party conference, didn't he, or a convention or something, saying, like, vote for me, basically, like last year, I think.
He's just going to say any old shit to get. Just says any old shit to get elected, basically.
If he does it, I want him to go down there dressed in a military uniform, like in Goldfinger, with a whole bunch of American troops.
I want him to do like a Jeremy Irons from Die Hard.
Full theatre.
How can I bring all conversations back to pro wrestling? I've recently started playing Total Extreme Wrestling, which is a fantasy wrestling booking thing, and I've got a mod that starts it in the real world in 1970. And of all of the promotions in the world, I took control of an Australian outfit that was known as WCW, not the one that you guys remember, an earlier one that was run by Jim Bonnet in Australia. And I've been learning about the locales of Sydney, and I've built a little studio so I've been learning this. I've been learning the geography of Australia, but because I'm based in Australia, I can't get that many people to work there. Because one, it's in Australia, and people don't want to move, and so on. But one of the people I was able to get, Simon, is Oddjob, because the guy Oddjob from thing was a wrestler called Harold Sakata. He was actually a wrestler.
Yeah.
And he was still knocking around in 1970. So I've managed to get him. So he's got some name recognition, but he's fat and old, and he can't work for more than 5 minutes. So if I try to put him in a match for longer than 5 minutes, I get a note saying like, yeah, he's going to blow up. You can't put him in a match of this length. And then I'm even going to bring it back to this. Another guy I've managed to get working for me is a wrestler who was in the original British Bulldogs, whose name was Ted Heath. His name was Ted Heath, and he actually adopted the gimmick of Sir Edward Heath, playing on the name recognition of the actual Ted Heath as a pro wrestling heel. So there we go.
His real name was Ted Heath.
His real name was Ted Heath. You can look him up. He was the original. There was an original tag team called the British Bulldogs, not the ones you remember, an earlier one. And I only discovered him through trying to make this Australian territory in 1970 work. So there we are. Anyway, let's carry on.
I can deal with you in sterling mark. And dollars, just a second. Dollars, Chris? 244.59 to the dollar sterling.
There was immediately.
But I got a conversation about Fort Knox and Ted Heath exactly into pro wrestling. Did you know? I mean, that's got to be a rare talent, isn't it?
Impressive. Most impressive.
Confusion as banks around the world struggled to come to terms with the new reality. They set up new improvised dealing rooms, buying and selling currencies as minute by minute they went up and down in value. But then President Nixon did something that seemed to...
You asked for a pause, Horace.
Yeah, sorry, Simon. Can you do James Earl Jones then? Have you got a range of? Have you got a repertoire of James Earl Jones?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, I can do a bit.
Can we hear a bit of that later, maybe?
You see, as soon as you ask me to do things, I completely forget all the dialogue.
No, maybe next week or something. But just yeah.
It is too late for me, son.
Yes, that's pretty good. Nothing can stop that now. I can't do his voice.
He also famously did This Is CNN, didn't he? This is CNN. I remember he was playing in the West End a few years ago. Was he still alive? Did he die?
No, he was gathered unto the Lord, I think, last year.
But I know he was like
really old, right?
A couple of years ago. He did a show in the West End. Shakespeare, I think it was.
Yeah.
Can I just get a B in the chat for people who've seen Best of the Best, which is probably his best film? Not really, of course.
I had a poster of Best and the Best on my wall when I was a kid. The video shop, right, used to be like, well, we don't have anything to do with these old posters, so they used to give them to me. And I had Best of the Best. I had I'm trying to remember what other posters they gave me now, like really random films, but I thought it looked cool, so I Best of the Best was a cool film, sort of.
Time Cop. The Best of the Best, yeah. I mean, it's not great acting or anything, but it's, yeah.
My favorite James Earl Jones is what's the one where he turns into the snake? Conan. Is it Conan? He turns into he's like the villain, and James Earl Jones turns into a snake at the end of the film. Is it Red Sonja? Is it Red Sonja?
It's an Arnie, right?
I think it's Conan. I think in one of the Conan movies, James Earl Jones is the king and he turns into a snake at the end of the film. So, yeah, it's Conan. There we are. Conan. I like Red Sonja too.
Is Red Sonja is that an Arnie film?
Red Sonja was not. I'm pretty sure Red Sonja was Arnie, and it had Shorty Round from Indiana Jones in it, and has various other people as well. She was quite hot, Red Sonja.
He still had power to change the world. He went to China. His arrival was broadcast live in America. Journalists compared it to the moon landings, because Nixon was going to a giant, mysterious country that had been cut off from the rest of the world for decades. And he was going to bring it into the modern global system.
Did I make up that Shorty Round is in Red Sonja? People are saying that Red Sonja is actually a crossover character from Conan. Is that true? I didn't know it was connected to the wider lore. Let's carry on.
Pass.
By now, Mao could hardly walk. The Americans had sent medical equipment ahead in case of an assassination attempt on Nixon.
Now, where this is masterful from Curtis is, if you've been watching this documentary series from the start, as we have, Mao has been a major character, hasn't he? And now Mao is meeting the new protagonist. The old protagonist is meeting the new protagonist. So deft bit of filmmaking by Curtis, bringing together his story arcs, because they haven't met so far. They've been separate parallels. You know, like Star Wars does that. There's 4 narratives going on at once, and then they converge. Now they're converging. So,
did I talk about Mao, his physical condition? He had Lou Gehrig's disease in the end. So he and heart issues as well. So he wasn't a well chappy.
Doesn't look very well, does he? There.
No.
But the Chinese took it and used it instead to resuscitate Mao. The meeting lasted for only an hour. Mao went back to bed, and Nixon didn't see him again. Instead, he went with Mao's wife.
Sorry to go back to Conan. I know you guys maybe haven't seen it, but at the start of Conan, right, I was always really troubled by the fact that Conan starts, right, as a little kid pushing this giant wheel, right, round, and like I don't know, he's like powering some like pre-steam mechanism or something, and he's pushing this massive wheel. And then it kind of like he's a kid, he was a teenager, and then it clips, and then it's like suggested that he's just been doing it for his entire life, and now he's grown up, and it's Arnie stacked, and it's like, okay, so one method of getting stacked is pushing a giant wheel for 18 years, but also I was really troubled by the like how sad and horrible his life must have been just pushing that wheel for 18 years. So yeah.
You see, you're not without feeling for your fellow man.
Yeah, I had a lot of feeling for young Conan pushing that wheel. It's kind of Sisyphean, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Sisyphus, yeah.
Wife, Jiang Qing, to see one of her revolutionary operas. On the surface, Jiang Qing seemed confident, but underneath, she realized that she could be destroyed at any minute. It wasn't just Mao. By now, the whole system of authority in China was beginning to fall apart, as many of those in power realized that the revolution had failed. But while Jiang Qing was preoccupied with real enemies, Nixon, sitting next to her, had now become obsessed with plotting to destroy his imaginary enemies. He had set up...
They weren't imaginary. They were, Adam, they weren't imaginary. They were real enemies. Why is he claiming they were imaginary? They did actually bring him down as well. This is what I'm going to be the heel. I'm wound up by this, Simon. Why is Curtis lying like this?
Well, I can't say. I don't know.
I would venture an explanation. It's just like standard among leftists, it seems. I have not come across hardly any, maybe any at all, exceptions to this, to think that the whole idea of communism and communists in the West as a danger was, I know this is not exactly what he's talking about, but that there were, you know, like that McCarthy was just a witch hunt for nothing. You know, that is a standard left-wing belief. Also, you know, they use the term Red Scare as a joke, like as in, yeah, it's just your mentality. That's all that happened there. You went mad. And so he's kind of doing that. He's reading that across to a much wider thing.
Do you know what came onto my YouTube timeline? Like, you know, when a video autoplays, a video started autoplaying of Christopher Hitchens on, you know, that Hoover Institute show with, what's his name, Peter?
I know the one.
It's usually Thomas. Yeah, Peter Robinson, right? That show, but it was like years ago, obviously, because Christopher Hitchens was alive, and it was about Trotsky. And I was thinking, well, I mean, it's a conservative show. I was expecting it to just be like a massive hatchet job on hating Trotsky, right? Because he was a commie.
He likes Trotsky, right? Yeah.
But no, I mean, literally, it's an hour of Christopher Hitchens and this other dude glazing, as the kids say, just absolutely loving Trotsky without any pushback, and about how he was great and Stalin was shit. I was like, what? Why is this going on a conservative boomer conservative show about how Trotsky was actually like kind of all right? And you know, the Hitchens are like, our idea of the Nazis, you know, our critique of Stalin is basically Trotsky's. That's a good thing. I was like, fucking hell! They even told you what was happening in broad daylight. I couldn't believe it. So anyway, that happened.
Is it Uncommon Knowledge? Is it that show?
Uncommon Knowledge. Peter Robinson. But yeah, I would. If anybody's watched my Stalin videos, where Trotsky's clearly the bad guy, right? Go back and watch Christopher Hitchens on Trotsky, because the extent to which the Cold War, the neocon Cold Warrior line on Trotsky and Stalin is basically the Trotsky line is remarkable. It's so on the nose. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, that's a bit of a side tangent, but I wonder if the reason that leftists never really believe it is because they know basically that a lot of the leftists in the West were Trotskyists, like Christopher Hitchens or Peter Hitchens back in the day, and so on. And so this is a kind of tactical. It's like when they're saying communist, they mean like people attached to the Soviet Union or Stalinists or something like this. Whereas, you know, they're kind of doing cover for their own little Trotsky clan. If that makes any sense. You know, Reds under the bed can mean two different things, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to spitball in here, but I feel like it would almost be impossible to be on the left and not be aware of some of those things. So.
I just want to address the comment in the chat. Chap who said, "I wonder why Curtis the shitlib would lie." I have to say, I don't think of Adam Curtis as terribly hardcore ideological, and would he certainly curates the information, creates his narratives. I sort of don't see him as concealing things by mendacious lying as such, but I think he has blind spots on certain things, and Richard Nixon has kind of been permafrozen as this emblematic character associated with paranoia. And you know, from the liberal left, at least, it looks like it's a case of some sort of false consciousness that he has. So on the one hand, I don't think Curtis would reject the idea of there being vested interest forces acting. In the Nixon case, though, I think his view is it was a peculiar idiosyncratic pathology of Nixon himself. That's what he chooses to go with. The idea that he lies, I think it just doesn't seem that plausible to me. I think Curtis trims his narrative to what he wants to convey, and he isn't, again, being a slavish historicist. He's trying to capture moods of historical events and how we change our thinking about things. And in areas, like I said before, about climate change, for example, he is captured by and has a blind spot to thoughts about global warming. He just believes it to be the case in that way. Again, as I said, the idea that he kind of is kind of some sort of, wicked kind of moustache twirling guy who is deliberately deceiving you. No, I think he sees the world a certain way, and we're trying to sort of fill out bits where we think maybe he's a bit underpowered.
I give you an example of someone who I do believe is a leftist who would know these sorts of things and lie about it. Would be Andrew Marr.
Yes.
He's the sort of person who knows the ins and outs of who was a Trotskyist and who was a Pabloist and all these other, like 52 varieties of communism. They know this stuff. Like, he's the sort, but I don't think Adam Curtis is from that sort of milieu. He's not like he's not from out of those circles in the same way. The guy in the chat asking why I don't turn the face cam on. If I'm on the face cam, I'm on my laptop, which is just sitting across from me here in my little kind of what's turned into a kind of studio setup in front of my shelf. Here, I'm in the corner on my desktop, and this desktop does not have a camera set. I don't even have a camera here. So I actually record this show and Office Hours on a different computer from the one where I do my videos. And in fact, it's quite a convoluted setup. If you really want to know how I do my stuff, I've got a little external hard drive here. I say little, it's got 2 terabytes on it. And basically, I record it on my laptop. I then transfer it to this external hard drive, physically take it over, copy it. Oh, this is so convoluted, but this is what I do. Copy it onto my desktop. Then, because the file is usually quite big, and to make sure that my voice is synced up, I stick the MP4 file into Handbrake so that it's got a constant 30 FPS, right? So that there's no desyncing of my voice and my face. And then I stick it into Adobe, and I'll stick the ad in there, and I'll put the bells and whistles on it, export it. Then I'll re-put it into Handbrake because it takes less time to upload, and that's the whole process. You happy now? I'll never explain that again, but I know there are some nerds out there who will understand. And when I used to make my videos with the PowerPoint, I would record in Audacity. I would export the file as a dot wave. I'd have CN levelator. I'd stick the audio file in CL levelator, which made sure that the audio was constant throughout. And then I'd stick the presentation slides on it and export it that way. All right? Okay.
You too can have a channel like Academic Agent. This is like Marco Pierre Waite saying I'm not a professional chef anymore. I'm a home cook. He's just giving you all the secrets.
Yeah, and then they'll say, "Oh, you're such a tech boomer, AA." I'm such a tech boomer. But I was forged in the steel of the 80s. I was programming BASIC before you could walk. I didn't. The most I got in BASIC on Spectrum, I got a red square to move like onto the screen, and I could move it left. That's as far as my BASIC programming went. Last time, speaking of friends, I've got a friend who's a physics PhD. I don't get, because we both have kids now, I don't get to see him that often. Last time I saw him, he was really excited. He was like, "Look what I've been working on." He's like, "Look, I've got a Spectrum working." And I was like, "Oh, great. Look, I've programmed a game in BASIC." And he'd actually just made like a little game. That's how cool he is. So there we go. All right, let's carry on.
A conspiracy based in the White House. It was run by a group of ex-intelligence agents, and they were already planning to bug, burgle, and blackmail Nixon's opponents. Behind his smile, he was preoccupied with plotting and scheming. Jiang Qing and Richard Nixon were two of the most powerful people in the world at that moment. But what they shared was a sense that power was now slipping from their grasp. While the new force that Nixon had unleashed money, was eating away at the idea that there was a fixed, predictable...
I'm now upset. People are calling me a tech boomer. Listen, I love lo-fi aesthetics. I love a kind of DIY feel. I don't like slick. I don't like slick production. So I've always gone by that idea of having it feel authentic and real. So I don't want it to be, you've got to understand, I don't want it to look professional. I want it to have that real lo-fi feeling. Like Bob Dylan in the early 90s, when he went back to basics and he recorded World Gone Wrong on a fucking cassette tape. And the Columbia Studios were like, "Where's your new album, Bob? It's here." And he literally gave them a cassette tape. And that record is the masters for it on a cassette tape that Dylan did in his own garage. And it's a fantastic record. Okay? I'm the Jack White of YouTube.
You see, I was just going to say, I think you should move to issuing all material on this channel on cassette tape. In fact, even better, you should do it by post, call it AA Magazine, and issue it with a special flexi disc.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would be fantastic. All right.
Sorry, flexi disc?
Yeah.
Or is that like
they were like cheap singles, vinyl singles that were issued with magazines back in the 80s.
Were they played on a vinyl player?
Yeah.
Never
Look at the guy saying, "Hey, I can't believe you fell for the fake post of an American bombing Chavez burial." Okay, but 1,400 people replied to it justifying it. So all of those people who justified it also fell for it.
What is that? Is it not true then that his mausoleum was struck?
Well, Radlib, my friend Stephen Carson, he looked into it, and apparently they hit some site next to it. They weren't actually targeting the tomb, but that was discovered that it was fake news only after. I mean, it was probably more like 2,000 people dogpiled a post of mine asking what the strategic purpose was. So there's literally 2,000 Americans, probably 75% of whom are bots, claiming that it was funny or humiliation is great or all of this sort of stuff. And because my internet wasn't working today, I was not able to get my video out this morning. But after this, I'm going to put up a post about Matt Walsh, because I don't like the sadism. I don't like sadism. There's a kind of nasty streak in some American right wingers where they get off on humiliation, like they defend like Abu Ghraib. Remember that torture stuff in the early. That is weird to me. It's not based. Yeah. It's gross.
No.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, I really don't like that. And it's got. I think it's kind of beta coded. I think it's like.
Well, especially in Matt Walsh's case.
I mean, it's the analogy I make, and I say this on the video, but I don't mind saying it again. It's like a guy who goes to work, takes a lot of shit from his boss, goes home, beats up his wife.
Correct.
Goes home, kicks his dog. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's how it comes off to me. So
yeah.
Anyway, let's carry on.
System that any politician could control. Because the bankers had realized that currencies could be traded globally, like any other asset. And what that had created was a fluid, constantly changing reality that no one was fully in control of.
35.42 then. Hello, 35.42. It dropped 100 points. We don't know why. It just dropped 100 points when everything else was staying still. 30
either way.
30 either way.
Change it.
Change.
Все на белом свете, люди издавна повторяются. Было, есть и снова будет так. Но для всех влюбленных песня заново начинается. Было, есть и снова будет так. Будет так, будет так.
I've just seen in the chat that Horus has to be off, so we might as well. This may be a new record for smallest amount of material covered.
Well, we got 6 minutes done or something.
Yeah, but it's been a while since we talked. We're catching up. So
Absolutely.
there's a few super chats before we get out of here. Ryan,
sorry, is this some Czech song or something?
This is a Soviet version of "Let It Be," where they changed all the lyrics. Budjet Tak. This is a couple of it's a Georgian actor there called Vakhtang Kikabidze, and the lady's called Lyudmila Gurchenko. They were both essentially Soviet dissidents at a certain level, but Kikabidze, the actor, he was very sort of loved in Georgia. Stood for parliament there, and he was sort of like a Georgian nationalist, essentially, and this is a kind of satirical takeoff of Let It Be. The lyrics basically boil down to saying everything continues in the same way, so that's why it's a sort of satirical jab at the Soviets.
Ryan says, with China and Russia putting weapons and spy ships in Venezuela, I'm supposed to cry over US power politicking because of Zionists, strings over swords. With China and Russia putting weapons and spy ships in Venezuela, I'm supposed to cry, blah, blah, blah. Well, I didn't say you have to cry. I just said, like, you don't have to kind of jizz yourself cheering it on, I mean, I don't, it's like, well, okay, whatever, but it's still, whatever way you want to look at it, it's not your empire. So to me, cheering it on has I don't know, it's like, what is it, like a football team? Is it like is that how it works? I don't know. I just don't get, like, I don't get the impetus for cheering it. I because I just don't see the American government as being on my side in particular.
Is it that there's like a mental sort of weariness of being outside whatever they see as acceptable for so long that you get a moment of indulgence of conformity? Like, you just indulge in being on the same side as the powerful just for one day. Like that.
No, we can be heroes just for one day.
Yeah.
Chris Primer says the guy who red-pilled Nick is more interesting. Who's that then? I thought he red-pilled himself, didn't he? Just through the experience of being in the GOP from the age of 17 or 18 or whatever.
Was it? Wasn't it Ben Shapiro who kind of radicalized Nick?
Well, I remember he said that one of the first people was Mark Levin. He said he used to listen to him on that interview with Piers Morgan. So
that will do it.
Yeah. I mean, radicalized by obviously opposing him, so to speak.
Lewis Short, as Nick tells it in his own, from his interviews and on his own show and so on, I think it's like finding that one area he wasn't allowed to question.
Yeah. And
the various attempts to bring him in over the years, and Laura Loomer and all these kind of shady characters in the background. And if you're go on, Horace.
I just said, what's shady about Laura Loomer? What do you mean?
Oh, fucking hell.
Wah.
Lewis Shaw Moffat says, my patience is greater than yours, AA. I will keep pestering you until you talk to Rurik about Russia. You will cave. You're gonna have to like literally tag him under a post on Twitter, and say follow him, and then get him to DM me or something, because that's the only way I'll remember, because I have just so much to do on but okay, but I have to check out like who he is and what he's about. Like I can't bring him on if he works for like Putin or something. I'll be crucified.
It doesn't work. I've read some of this guy's stuff. It doesn't work for Putin.
Okay.
But, you may still be wasting your time. I was supposed to. Well, I tried to interact a bit, but he just got impatient with me asking questions that he just thought I was like ignorant or something. I don't know. But it was like, no, I'm testing your claim. I'm testing it to potentially destruction. And
I see.
Just,
is he pro-Russia though, or us?
No, not at all. No. It's a fairly interesting claim that he makes, but no.
Okay.
He seems to be against both sides.
Chris Primer says Arnold was embarrassed by Red Sonja. Okay. Why? Because of his performance. He's the same in bloody every film, honey. I'm not having a go. I mean, do you think Arnold Schwarzenegger's acting skills improved over his career?
Allegedly, when he went to Hollywood, he had a conversation with a producer who said to him, Arnold, you're not going to work in movies. You speak really woodenly, you look really weird, and you're kind of like a robot. And in his biography, Arnold says, "So I decided to turn this thing to my advantage."
Which is true, right?
Literally plays the Terminator.
Play the Terminator, yeah.
But I would say, of all the films I've seen Arnie in the Terminator, he seems most at home in that role. Like, it really does suit him, as much as any role ever has. He plays it quite naturally.
Work to your strengths. We always encourage it on this channel.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Raise a God. I mean, what else did he do? Kindergarten Cop. Jingle All the Way. He had a period where he started doing comedy, didn't he? Twins. He did comedy. There's a comedy line in Arnie's career. Running Man, was that him?
Kindergarten Cop.
Red Dawn, was that him?
Total Recall.
Was Red Dawn Arnie? I think I read it. But...
no, not Red Dawn. There's Red Sonja, and there's another Red film with Arnie in as well.
Yeah.
I had a one of my mates at school. His dad was really into chronic cheese 80s action movies. Got had them all on VHS and so on. He was always watching them, and every once in a while I was 14, 15, and we'd sit down and watch one of these kind of properly retarded 80s action movies. They were kind of enjoyable, to be honest, and typically they'd have either Sly Stallone or Arnie in them. So
Commando is a dumb one.
Commando, yeah. Predator, that's Arnie in it.
Yeah, that's all right. It's decent. Good fun.
Yeah.
Bad acting. Really bad acting.
Jesse Ventura's in that one. Speaking of wrestling, there you go. I can bring anything back to wrestling. Razor God says, I got absolutely hooked on the Adam Curtis series and love it. What's the deal with you and Zuma Historian? I hear you argue on X from a friend. Well, I don't really argue with him because I blocked him a long time ago, but I have a view that Zuma Historian is a slop merchant, basically, that he's very much like a British version of Captive Dreamer, who's always excited about whatever is currently trending. And, I mean, everybody went wild about a week ago about this Egyptian activist and then immediately forgot about it, even though I was called everything. I was like, what's this all about then? Again, I saw that Zio network boosting it. Everybody meant to get angry about it. I was like, I don't give a fucking shit about this. Everybody dogpile me. So now, this year, I guarantee you for 365 days, I'm going to remind everybody about this Egyptian activist and be more angry than you are every single day. We're still only a week in and people are saying, why do you keep on going on about this guy? I was like, a week ago, this was the most important thing.
Yeah.
Enough for people to denounce me over, and now you've even forgotten about him. And that, in a nutshell, is why I don't like Zuma Historian.
Who's the wrestler that you're using in the tweets for that? The very fierce-looking guy.
Triple H. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who's again a wrestler that was relentlessly pushed by Vince McMahon against what the fans' wishes. Dissident Knight says, kind of a boring wrestler in a way, but Dissident Knight says, check out the AA and pork scratching supercut before the NSO stream. So yeah, in fact, I've got the third pork scratchings review. There's controversy in the pork scratchings world because my brother, who bought me them all, has been very critical of my review method. So there we go. So check that out. I'll put it out after this stream. Horus, where can people find your stuff, sir?
eternalhorus.substack.com. I put up a new essay a couple of weeks ago just before Christmas. People might find interesting.
Simon.
I'm on Twitter at Simon__Roberts, and I'd quickly like to shill my friends at the Pendragon Foundation. Put it into Google, you'll find their website at pendragon.foundation. It's an initiative led by Mr. Nathan Hood, who many of you will know, to restore ruined castles in Britain, to reclaim these ancient spaces and make them great again.
I'll just remind people, do pick up courses at Academic Agency, promo code ShawJan. Buy it now. This is another bit of marketing trick, Simon, right? Just issue a command.
Who was the German propagandist you said you'd listened to about?
I can't remember his name. His name was
begins with G. No,
no, he worked for him.
He
worked for him, and he was interviewed in the 60s or whatever, and he went into all of the techniques they used to use, and it was like repeat it every day, keep it simple, make it a command. And all I've done is put theory into practice, really. But I think like the actual admin do it as well, because once you see them, you kind of notice them everywhere.
I think there's a sort of nostrum in advertising about you have to tell people the same thing 7 times before it sinks in.
Yeah, repetition, and make sure there's a command, a call to action in there.
Yeah,
and various other things. That persuasion book, Caladini. If you do Foundations of Rhetoric, I talk about all this in there because it's all really advanced rhetoric, is what it is. But all right, see you all again next week. I should have a video up later on about Matt Walsh, and Pork Scratchings review will go up as well. And I'll see you all soon. Get out.
What goes on in this town is none of your business.
As long as I'm living here, it is.
Then maybe you shouldn't be living here!
Well, that's easily fixed.